Slavery in the early Roman Republic. The objection that immediately arises when discussing libertarianism in Rome is the issue of ancient slavery. We previously mentioned that among the Romans, libertarianism was more a matter of empiricism than ideology, and it is clear that modern libertarianism, especially since Locke asserted that every man owns himself, cannot tolerate slavery. But it would be unwise to argue this to deny the profound libertarianism of Roman republican practice, just as it would be unwise to deny the label of democracy to Pericles' Athens for the same reasons. In antiquity, it must be remembered that slaves practically lost their status as human beings to be assimilated to property or tools. This was a constant shared by the entire ancient world, and it is in this context that the Roman model must be placed. This means that the ancients did not have the same conception of human dignity as we do. Society and the Roman order must be considered in relation to all their neighbours, not in relation to our modern democracies. Relative to their neighbours, if the slave was as much a slave in Rome as elsewhere, the free man was more free and more securely free than elsewhere. That is to say, for those to whom the dignity of man was recognized, the associated rights were recognized and guaranteed. The great progress of modern libertarianism, compared to Roman libertarianism, is not the invention of fundamental rights and their guarantee by the rule of law, but the recognition of human dignity for all human beings, regardless of race, gender, and so on. So, in this ancient world where it was constant and universal that every human being was not recognized as possessing inalienable dignity, the Roman conception of the free man can and should be considered genuinely liberal in practice. Finally, we must add that during the first 250 years of the history of the Roman Republic, the time of the most pronounced libertarianism, slavery remained very marginal. Indeed, wars were limited and did not pour forth streams of slaves, as would be the case from the 3rd century BC, with the first large-scale conflicts against Carthage known as the Punic Wars. Contrary to what the historian Polybius believed, it was not the mixed character of the republican regime, combining monarchical elements, consular power, oligarchic elements, the Senate, and democratic elements, the Comitia, that ensured the Republic's centuries-long stability and its triumphs. The Comitia were assemblies composed of Roman citizens, responsible for voting in certain elections or adopting various motions, laws, declarations of war, capital punishments. The Greek historian's understanding was influenced by the Hellenic obsession with balance, the just middle guaranteeing stability. The successes of the Roman Republic must be attributed to the most advanced concept of the rule of law, respect for constitutional norms, and the guarantee of individual rights found in antiquity. While Athens had mainly experienced demagogic democracies, criticized by philosophers like Aristotle, advocating the collectivist concept of freedom discussed earlier, Rome came closest, in ancient times, to Aristotle's ideal political system, in which the freedom and power of the people were limited by the inalienable freedom and power of each individual over themselves. The longevity of the Roman Republic is due less to its mixed regime than to the unwavering Roman attachment, for several centuries, to certain foundational principles. These principles guaranteed each Roman citizen a certain number of rights equivalent to what we now call fundamental rights. This allowed the establishment of a dynamic economy as well as an attractive social model, appealing to the peoples of Italy, which facilitated their voluntary submission to Rome, considering the loyalty they showed during the Punic Wars. It was this model that made Rome's fortune, which found a considerable comparative advantage over the rest of the ancient world. But Rome's fortune, precisely, was a collective fortune. Once acquired, it became a source of envy among the Romans themselves, and led to the first excesses in the exercise of state power. Over time, therefore, this Roman liberal model would begin to deteriorate, due to abuses, external predation, the massive introduction of slavery into Roman civilization, socio-economic crises, and slowly drift toward statism and socialism.